on time. And I'll just get started first by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on today. In my instance, I'm meeting or speaking to you from Ghana land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge my gratitude that we share this land today, my sorrow for some of the cost of that sharing, and my hope and belief that we can move to a place of equity, justice and partnership together. Thank you everybody for coming on board. We've got quite a good attendance with a few doubles in terms of those, in terms of people that are here with us today. I do appreciate everyone coming in, logging in and having a listen to what we do here at Life Without Barriers and what foster care means to us. We have started these webinars and run them on a monthly basis because of the very high demand for foster carers that's out there now. And we're finding that we're having to say no to a lot of placement referrals for young people because we don't have enough foster carers, or the foster carers that we have said have got enough, so we need more. So providing this information to anybody that's willing to hear us is a starting point to raising awareness and getting people to think about foster care. As it stands, just the fact that you've logged in here today and shown an interest is plenty enough. If you come to the end of this particular presentation and find that foster care is not for you, we still very much appreciate that you're here and listening, because the chances are you'll speak about this to somebody else, and somebody else might speak about it to their neighbour or school teacher, sister, brother, whatever, and the news gets out and people then start to contemplate. Also here at Life Without Barriers, we're about to start a new campaign. So you'll start seeing us and hearing about Life Without Barriers and about foster care in all sorts of different areas. So if you speak about this in other places, it might just trigger somebody to click on and hear about it a little bit more after hearing more of our campaign as it goes along. So first of all, in terms of introductions, my name is Avril and I am an operations manager for foster care support, but previously was the carer practice manager who looks after the team that does all of the assessments of our foster carers. I've just recently moved into this new role, but I'm continuing with this particular providing support to the assessment team while we work on the recruitment process to get somebody else to take over. So it might not be me the next time you come to, if you do want to hear about this again. Yes, so this has allowed us to be able to put on presentations on a monthly basis, and with the COVID shutdowns and everything, we're getting better at the technology around it. So I am still stumbling sometimes on how to run the thing, but we're all learning. Joining me tonight is Kristy, who is a Life Without Barriers carer ambassador. She's a specialist carer and works alongside of all of the recruitment work that we do, getting out there and talking to carers and people that are interested. Kristy, sorry, could you perhaps just tell a bit about yourself and where you started in foster care? Because I don't think anybody can see you until you speak.
Oh, okay. Well, here I am. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, we've been foster carers for about 5 years now. Initially, we got into it to do respite. Once we saw how much need was there and did the training and all that, we felt like we could do more than just respite. Not not to say that when I say just respite is super important and super valuable. But yeah, we also did some short-term placements, and we've now got a long-term teenager in our home as well. So yeah, that's a bit of our fostering journey. Obviously there's more to us than that, but yeah, that'll do for now.
Thank you, Kristy. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Before 2020, these sessions were run in person at community centres and school halls and things like this. And I would tell you where your toilets are and the tea and coffee and the biscuits and all those sort of things. Clearly, I don't need to do that here. I'm pretty sure you all know where all of those things are in your homes. I wish that I could supply you biscuits and a cup of tea, because that is one of the nice things about going out to hear these information sessions. Generally, you get something for it. But anyway, what I do need to point out to everybody is that I can't see, and the panelists can't see any of you. I've got a list of names on my screen over to the left there. But there is a chat box if you can find it. I think you'll find it up to the right of your screens. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box and we will work at answering those. You probably find a lot of the time that you'll anticipate a question, or you'll ask a question just as I'm about to move into that section to talk about it. So if we don't answer it straight away, it may very well be that your question will be answered really shortly. Also, if it doesn't look like it's going to be, or Kristy has something, to point out with it, we'll answer where we can. There's an opportunity at the end of this session for everyone to ask questions and give some feedback. So please don't feel that we're not answering your questions. It may be that your question's coming. And of course, if anybody's got any tech issues, you should be able to log back into the same link that you got in here in the first instance. And we will do our best to make sure we're still running smoothly. We also are recording tonight's session, and the session, of course, won't pick up the chat box. It won't pick up who's attending. It'll just be, I think, my face and Kristy's face when Kristy's talking that comes up on the screen, and that the link for that, the filming of tonight's session, will be sent to you and anybody that might not have turned up, so that if you want to have a look at it again or share it with your networks, you are very, very welcome to do so. So the overview or the plan for tonight is that I will give you a broad overview of what Life Without Barriers is as a whole. We are much bigger than just foster care. And just so that you know who you're dealing with and what we do and how we contribute in this wonderful world of ours. And that sort of bit will take about 20 minutes to half an hour. And then we will go through some common questions that come up. I'll talk a bit more about foster care in particular, what it is, who needs it, how we become one, and what that process looks like. And then we will open it up really for questions and answers. After that, if you're still really interested and want to take the next steps, there's a link that'll get put in the chat box, which I think Sharon can probably do now, which is the Call Me Back form, which is a very, very quick form. If you click on that, put in your details, somebody from our intake office, which is a national section, will give you a call within 24, 48 hours to have a chat a little bit further, answer any further questions and get you started on your journey into looking at becoming a foster carer. So Sharon's just put that link in there. If you were to click on it, it would pop a little form up on your screen. So throughout the night, we'll do that so that you don't have to scroll back up later, but just you can open it and move it across if you want to have it there if you're ready to go, but otherwise when you're ready. So moving forward onto some of the fun stuff now and testing your tech savviness with the chat box. I think a lot of people have typed in the chat box, but let's try again. Can you please just put in the chat box where it is that you are watching this from, your town or suburb, not lounge room or bedroom. I'm so funny, I laugh at my own jokes, sorry. It would be great to hear and see where people are spread around the place. We've got Barossa Valley, Prospect, Pages Flat. I've never heard of Pages Flat.
Pages Flat, just down the road from me.
Ah, there you go. So in the south then. Dover Gardens, Gawler East. I'm in Gawler as well. Mawson Lakes. Fantastic. I did on the intake screen see somebody had a postcode of beginning with 3. So I wondered if there was somebody from 3 Victoria, I think. Thank you. So yes, we are, and we do recruit right across South Australia. So sometimes we get people from regional areas coming in to have a look and listen. Next month, we'll be out in Mount Gambier doing a face-to-face, providing COVID doesn't shut us down, doing a face-to-face information session as well. So the next question for you is, how long have you thought about foster care? The answers to this generally are really quite broad. Some people have just seen the little ad that we put up on Facebook or some other platform and have just clicked on it and gone, oh, I'll have a look at this. Other people have thought about it for years and years. Other people have, sort of thought about it and then wanted to wait till it's the right time. So it's really interesting to see how many, and I can see there's years so far people are, and quite often it is sort of 2 to 7 years is a very big standard of or common sort of range of thinking about foster care. Thank you. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'll talk very quickly now about Life Without Barriers and what we are about, so that you know who you're dealing with. Kelly and Will, about 8 years since starting my own husband, 8 years. I'm telling him to think about it. Yeah, sometimes it takes a while for husbands to come along. Kristy, was that your experience?
Not so much convincing him, just we talked about it together for a long time. Like even before we had our last one, we're like, do we have another one or do we do foster care? And then it kept just getting put on the back burner.
Right. Well, it's very good that you finally got here. Thank you. Right. So who is Life Without Barriers? This is a slide that sort of hits you in the face very quickly. Lots of information on this slide, so I'll just summarise. We are a national social purpose organisation with a mission to partner with people to change lives for the better. We support over 23,000 people in more than 500 communities across Australia. I think we're in every state now, possibly not ACT. We were founded in 1995 in Newcastle, New South Wales, and our initial services were purely to meet the needs of people with disabilities. We still have a head office in Newcastle, but a satellite national office in the Sydney CBD. And we also have offices in all states and the Northern Territory. Our office here in South Australia is in Unley. If you ever driven up King William Street or Green Hill Road, you've probably seen our great big square building with Life Without Barriers spattered on the corner of King William and Green Hill Road. We also have offices in Mount Gambier, and we support the Port Pirie region as well with some outreach stuff. We used to have an office in Port Pirie, but just recently have brought that back in, and we're supporting the Port Pirie, Kadina and the Mid-North region from sort of Gawler area, which isn't too bad. So we care in particular around, of course, families and children, and we do foster care also residential care, now moving into supported independent living for young people exiting care. We're about to start and launch into a new program called Mockingbird Family, which is, again, another foster care community of care program, which you'll start to hear lots more about if you come through our program. We also have are starting with a reunification service as well. So we all start recruiting and looking for carers who are prepared, willing and open to support young people out of their family environment to begin with, but to support them and their families to return children to the care of their biological parents. That's very, very new off the ground as well, but it is very much emerging. We also have disability services, which includes NDIS support and coordination. We've got quite a strong mental health team and alcohol and other drugs programs. We do aged care support, supporting people in the community to stay at home rather than move into aged care facilities. We also support the homelessness or people that are at risk of becoming homeless. We've had an asylum seeker and refugee program and very strong commitments to improving the outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We also do a lot of advocacy for people from other culturally diverse backgrounds and other groups of people who are vulnerable to social exclusion. So you'll find Life Without Barriers joins in on all kinds of events and activities to raise awareness of all sorts of issues that create barriers in society for people. So these are our values, and a lot of organisations. I've been with Life Without Barriers for 2 years, coming up to 2 years now, and I have to say it's the first organisation I've ever been with who really lives these values to like they're really core to us all and to everything that we practice. And of course, everything is founded in relationships. And building those relationships first. We're also really imaginative. So when we hear no, we want to find out why, and we want to think up ways that we can make that change that answer. We're very respectful across all areas in our dealings with people and very much welcome diversity. We're responsive and try to get onto things really quickly. And do things well. And we're also courageous, so we're not afraid to stand up and really shout out for the people that don't have a voice and give people a voice. And those are some you'll find right across our agency that 99.9% of the people that you come across that work and live around Life Without Barriers, you'll find we follow these values and really hold them close. So in terms of our commitment to children and young people, we've got a very strong mission statement across this when it comes to looking after our young people. And a lot of this and this commitment and statement emerged after the Royal Commissions for Children in Care and Child Sex Abuse. So we, and I'll say this, I'll read it off the screen for this one, that every child has a right to feel safe and respected, and we all have a responsibility to make sure their safety comes first and that they're well cared for, protected from abuse and given the respect that they deserve. So we have a big commitment and a big focus on a training program called We Put Children First, Understanding Child Sexual Abuse. So that is able to be accessed on our website. Thank you, Kaz. If you want to find out more, you can certainly go to the Straight website and click on those links. But also, if you become a foster carer, there's a training that's mandatory to be completed in your foster care assessment journey. So, and we do have about to release also a series called the Safe Book Series, which is when you do have a child in your care, it is a set of books that are age appropriate, developmentally appropriate to young people, to talk to them about where they can go and who they can speak to and how they can feel safe in saying that they don't feel safe if they don't feel safe. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the overview about life without barriers and all the broad things. And I'll move into discussing a little bit more detail about what foster care actually is. So foster care, and I'm sure some of you are quite well aware of what it is here in Australia. It's the temporary or permanent placement of children who are unable to live with either of their birth parents due to factors relating to either child abuse, neglect, abandonment, and or child safety. Foster care provides a secure and safe environment for children, while the Department of Child Protection determines the next steps in ensuring the child's safety. So that's whether or not the child is unable to return full-time to parents, or whether there's a process or actions that need to be taken into consideration as we go. Children come into foster care at all ages and stages, including newborns straight from hospital. In fact, it's interesting that there has been quite a spike on newborns recently. Some children will stay in care for a day, a few weeks, sometimes for a couple of years, and others will be placed in foster care permanently. Sometimes children enter a family as a temporary or a short-term placement, and they end up staying there permanently. So quite often, I think Kristy can speak to this quite well in terms of the trajectory of young people. Do you want to explain how your long-term placement arrived?
Yes. So our young person was a respite, a child that we provided respite for on a monthly basis. And then she came for an emergency respite that was for the weekend, possibly the week, turned into 2 weeks. And then we found out that she couldn't return to her previous placement. So they were exploring options for her, and we said, hey, she fits. She's completely not what we were looking for in a long-term placement, because we had children around her age and younger than her. So, but once she was here and she fitted so beautifully and she needed a home, the idea of her then going off to strangers just broke our hearts, and we had our registration changed so that we could keep her here. So she's been here 8 months now and is just part of the family. Yeah.
Thank you, Kristy. Yes, so that can happen too, in terms of, and quite often is the way that young people end up staying permanently, and they go to a place where it might only be short term. So, you know, be ready to have your heart stolen by these beautiful young people, and work with us to find the best solutions for them. So anyway, as you work through the assessment process, if you do go further, what we find is that that particular assessment process will certainly help you and us decide what fits you and your family the best, and that's rated or assessed usually on your current situation, where you're living, what your family looks like, and your availability, and also your skills development, and where we can build, or you might already have all the skills that you need. But whatever you choose to do, your commitment is really valued, whether it's respite, a quick overnight emergencies and things like that. Oh, there you go, Kristy's just added in there. They did have a choice and they could have said no. Which, yes, we need to make sure that we're making the right match. We need to make sure that our foster carers are really keen and open and willing to look after the children. So we do try and give you as much information as we can so that you can make that decision. So now there are two main ways that foster care placements differ. These are the length of stay, and as in how long the child will be there, as we were talking about, you know, respite and whatnot, and also the needs of the young person that requires the placement. So most placements have a level of complexity because children are coming in from, you know, really quite difficult situations, and that builds a level of behaviour and complexity that's just inevitable. And so the complexity of needs is rated to some degree as to what level of care they require. So in terms of the length of stay, we've got the short-term and emergency, which can be anywhere from 1 night up to 18 months or 2 years. And usually for the child, this usually happens when we're looking, or the department is looking to return the child to biological family. So they just need somewhere to hold the child and someone to really support the child as that work is done. Then we have the long term, where it is often the intention that you'll have the child full-time or until they turn 18 years of age. Quite often the case, and the best foster carers are those carers where the child becomes part of the family, and even at 18 is still, living at home, not sort of, turfed out. Okay, that's all finished there. And then there's the respite or weekend care, sometimes through school holidays, a week of the school holidays here and there, which is aimed at providing opportunities for young people and carers to have breaks from their primary placements and refresh and have some experiences of different, networks, a little bit like your natural networks, where you've got kids that go and stay at grandma and grandpa's house, or they go and stay with their aunties or overnight with a friend or things like that. So we do try and make that as normal as possible in terms of being able to provide that respite and relationship. So then here in South Australia, we have 2 types of complexity level. We've got the general placements and specialist. And in theory, young people in general foster care placements have less complex needs. But where there's a child who requires a specialist placement, they generally have more complex needs, and the carers require a higher level of training and commitment to meet those needs in a therapeutic way. So they're called therapeutic placements, and we do offer and provide a higher level of support to those placements. In reality, most kids in foster care have a level of complexity requiring a therapeutic approach to their care, but specialist placements are usually more profound in their intensity. So complex support needs could be due to learning difficulties, communication difficulties in terms of how they're, whether it's developmental delay, intellectual disabilities, we have physical disabilities and complex health needs. But we also have young people that have experienced quite significant trauma, especially if they're coming into care later in life. And that does sometimes present with complex and challenging behaviours that, require a special kind of approach to address and help the child to learn and heal and interact in society in a healthy way. And then we have our really specialist placements where the child presents with all of the above. So, we've got from one end of the spectrum to the other, I can absolutely assure you. And the level of care and support that we provide over that is dependent on what that complexity is. So specialist carers, in particular, we always sort of in the assessment process are looking to consider every carer applicant to be considered as for specialist care. And we start at that really high level. And then as we work through an assessment, sometimes we can find that maybe general care is the best way to go first to build skills, or sometimes only, it really does depend on what happens and the circumstances. But specialist carers do need to be more flexible and readily available. It used to be the case that there was an expectation if you were a specialist carer that one carer would not work. But that has times and things have changed a lot now. So what we ask is flexibility. So if a young person who does have complex medical needs and has to go to the hospital a lot, or has complex behaviour and can't engage in full-time school, then there needs to be the flexibility in the carer family to be able to meet the needs of that young person. Specialist care does get a higher reimbursement. So we do provide like there's 2 levels of reimbursement. One is for general, which then, depending on complexity, sometimes there are carer payment loadings that are placed on top of that general placement to help support extra travel needs and things like that. And then the specialist placements have a much higher reimbursement that helps to compensate for one carer not working. They're also in a specialist care provided with more regular and intensive support. So that's fortnightly home visits that work in a therapeutic supervision model. So we come to your home every fortnight. It is an expectation that you engage in a therapeutic relationship with the child and family practitioner. And talk and work through strategies and care plans to be able to meet the needs of the young person in your care. And then, of course, with specialist care, we do look and provide extra training and clinical support, all sorts of things in that specialist space. So now we're just going to move into stretch your brains a little bit and talk about the reasons why some children find themselves coming into foster care. So those reasons are just absolutely a variety of reasons, but predominantly, of course, is abuse or neglect, which is obviously the primary reason why children come into care. But we also have situations where there's a serious illness of a parent. Life Without Barriers is supporting a family right now at the moment with 3 children who we're looking after while mum is in hospital, and there is no support network around her that was able to look after these young people and meet their needs. So there are, sort of reasons, and that's quite for no reason other than the fact that there is little community support for the family. We also have families that are unable to provide for children, so they come into care in the sense of abject poverty, mental health disorders, chronic illness that puts them in a situation where they're just unable to meet the needs of a child or young person. And unfortunately, because of with the COVID thing, we are anticipating and starting to see a rise in the needs because financial support and job security has plummeted. Domestic violence, alcohol and drug abuse has increased. And of course, that has an impact on our children and young people. So here's a question for you. Sometimes I'm surprised by the answers in that they get it spot on, and other times it's right off. How many children, if you want to pop it in the chat box, if we had virtual things going on here, I'd be able to throw you a chocolate for the person that got closest. How many children are currently, do you think, are in out-of-home care across Australia? That's not just in South Australia. We'll just go across Australia to start with. A lot, says Kelly. Yes, there. Yep, that's pretty close. Kaz says 350. 3,300 across Australia. You all might be surprised. Several thousand. I think you're the closest, Deb. Again, you'd get another chocolate from me. Across Australia, these are stats as at February 2020. South Australia, so there's, around 46,000 children in care. That's okay, Kaz. That's really fine. Close to 46,000 children in care at any given time across Australia. In South Australia, we have just over 4,000. So I think it's about 4,300 children in South Australia in care. And that includes, all variety of care types, so general and foster care. And it's too many. And it is very sad. And the reason why we are seeking and looking for exceptional people to sort of meet the need. So yes, really that many, Lydia. So in 2018, 2019, and I do want to increase and find the new stats, because I do believe there are new stats out now, but there were over 70,000 calls made to the Child Abuse Report Line, that's just purely for South Australia. That is not any other state. From there, those calls are vetted, and we try and work out, they essentially, some of them don't necessarily meet the criteria for intervention, so they get filtered out or screened out. And then the ones that don't get screened out, of course, end up going to the Department of Child Protection investigation officers to have a look at. So this graph or pie chart shows you the substantiated, where there is evidence of harm types over the year, and the percentages of those. And as you can see, emotional abuse and neglect make up the lion's share of the reasons why the Department of Child Protection gets involved. It has always been a very, very difficult thing to assess emotional abuse and neglect. We're getting better and better at doing so. But then, of course, we've got those situations where there is physical abuse and child sex abuse that we intervene in. And you find quite often, if we can get into a family early enough and start to give that early intervention to teach parents how to look after their children, we would be, with the early intervention services, we would be able to have a much larger impact. Most, I would say 95%, 99% even, of people that wake up in the morning, parents that wake up in the morning, don't wake up with an intention to harm or neglect their child. And there are so many different reasons that play into how people are obstructed from being able to look after their children. It is very, very rare to see intentional harm. And it's something that we, and I in particular, am incredibly compassionate about with our care, with our families and the biological families of our children, that the circumstances that they find themselves in and the history of their care has impacted greatly on themselves. And I think that we need to show compassion for that. Right, so at this point, we've learned about the different types of foster care, and we've just unpacked how kids come into care. The rest of the presentation will look at what we're looking for in foster carers or foster parents, and what the process is to become one. So who can be a foster carer? Fundamental task of being a foster carer is to provide a safe environment, and essentially to perform or to form positive and nurturing relationships with children and young people in care, and to help them build new skills which are necessary to manage life events successfully. So as a foster carer, really, that's your job. That's to give the child an experience of having a positive relationship with someone who's going to accept them for who they are and guide and help them to build the skills that they need. And that means parenting differently to what you would parent a child that has not experienced neglect or abuse. So here we are. Here are the answers to the exam, I have to say. We are looking for very specific qualities in carers and foster parents. And all of these qualities have been built and evidenced by a lot of research done by agencies like Life Without Barriers and our partners at universities. And also we partner with universities in the United States, Cornell University, with regard to the evidence that we need and what makes a good carer. So in terms of this, all throughout the entire assessment, these are the qualities that we are looking for in our carers. So to be warm and nurturing, of course, but also altruistic, really thinking that they can make a difference and wanting to make a difference in the world and making a positive impact. being curious about what drives young people's behaviour and curious about how we can approach children to be able to meet their needs in a way that helps them to learn to do things differently. We've got to be really, really flexible and able to adapt and change our approaches to meet the needs of our young people, because sometimes they can be quite difficult to, or complex in what their needs are. I won't say difficult. It's hard, but certainly not intentional on the young person's behalf. We've also got to be we need carers who are able to appreciate how important biological family are and to support any connection that they can with biological family. We've got to be sensitive, willing to invest time and money. Even though there are reimbursements, it's still foster care. Whilst there's continual advocacy to have foster care recognised as a much higher level role, it still is predominantly considered by funding bodies as a volunteer job, and therefore the reimbursements are about meeting the costs rather than any sort of additional stuff. So taking a child into care sometimes does cost more than what you get. Life Without Barriers and other agencies that support foster care certainly provide the advocacy to try and get you carers reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenses where that can be sometimes a little bit difficult. One of the things that I really want to push is, and I say this a lot in all of my conversations with foster care applicants, is foster carers need to be prepared to throw the Parenting 101 handbook out the window. So when a child, I think, remember Super Nanny? I think it was a show called Super Nanny where there's the naughty corner or the naughty step or the mat and you time out, and all of those traditional parenting standards of taking away things from children when they're naughty because they need those consequences and all of those sort of things. All of those standard parenting techniques and strategies to build and guide behaviour of children that have not experienced abuse and neglect don't work. And over again, we see in all of the research, we have to have a different approach to children that have had these experiences. Developmentally, they have been compromised because their needs have not been met at certain stages of their development. And so we need to parent them differently. And so what we're looking for in carers in all of these situations is carers that are open to doing things differently and not closed and say, well, I'm not going to behave, that in those sort of ways. So do keep all of that in mind. If you're moving forward, we will be looking for flexibility, adaptability, and being able to move through life a little bit differently. So who can be a foster carer is my next step. And essentially, if you've got two legs and you're breathing, we will certainly be happy to consider you as, in the first instance. The non-negotiables, I suppose, are people, we start around the age of 25 for the most part. There are exceptions to that rule. So if you are under 25 and still interested or know someone that would be ideal, that can sometimes be talked through and negotiated around. You can be of any culture. You can have children or not have children. Although if you don't have children, if you've gone through IVF and you haven't, IVF has not been successful and you're seeking foster care to have your own child, that's kind of talked through quite seriously in foster care. But yeah, certainly not a non-negotiable. There's just some things we go a little deeper on. You need to have a spare room. And interestingly, just recently, we've had some foster care applicants that have come through our national where they've got 3 rooms, 2 children. So the parents have got 1 room, 1 child's in another room, and then the little ones in a bassinet in the parents' room, so they have a spare room. Unfortunately, we can't accept that as being a spare room, because at some stage that child may want, the biological child may want their own room back. So there has to be capacity in the home for every child in that home to have their own room and space, and most especially, of course, for a foster child to have their own room. Everybody in the household needs to be active and a willing participant in fostering children. So if you do have family members living in the home that are not so keen on the idea, that is something that we will talk through with you to see whether or not now's the right time. And of course, you've got to have the patience and resilience to build positive relationships with a child that may struggle to trust you and may struggle to be or be resistant to being cared for a little while as they get to settle in. So yeah, a lot of patience. So I've certainly heard that foster carers say that it's not scary, but it is challenging. I think actually, Kristy, that might have been your words once to me, and I've used them ongoing. So the support that we provide is critical to foster, so the foster carers can be confident and secure in what they're doing. And there's a variety of ways that Life Without Barriers supports foster carers. So we'll start here at the top of this circle at the 24/7 support. So we have an on-call, all of our child and family practitioners are on a 24/7 on-call roster. So during the day, you would speak with your allocated child and family practitioner if you needed anything, but on the weekends and after hours, there's an on-call number that you can call, and that has a direct line to a child and family practitioner that can provide support, and they have direct lines to their line managers if it's quite a complex matter. We also have a care team approach. So you've got the Department of Child Protection has an allocated worker for the child. You as a foster carer have an allocated worker as a practitioner to help support. And then there could be allied health professionals and the school SSOs if they're needed in the school. So we do encourage and really support a care team approach around the child to make sure all of the child's domains are being met and understood. We have a clinical team. So in our specialist program, we've got clinicians, psychologists, and social worker clinicians who are able to do one-on-one work with carers or with children, do assessment work and all kinds of support. They run certain trainings and that sort of thing from a psychological perspective. But also for our general placements, they provide a consultative role. So if there are complex matters in a general placement that need some therapeutic or clinical support over, the child and family practitioner may speak with the clinicians to get some advice. Of course, there's the reimbursement, which I went through earlier. We've got the employee assistance program. So that provides with some short time limited interaction with our service provider, so with a psychologist for anything to do with what your family needs. We do and are building a really strong network of social events. We've got a living arts program, and we are starting to want. Of course, COVID keeps interrupting a lot of this, but we do want to bring carers together and young people together so that people who live similar lives and move in similar circles are able to speak with each other and build networks. And our Living Arts program also does outreach and group work, so music groups and things like that as well for young people and families. We have respite carers, and again, not all. Sometimes a young person coming into care, if they're particularly complex or it's not in their best interest to have respite away from the home, we're trying to find different ways of being flexible to provide those opportunities for carers to refresh and recharge through a respite arrangement. So we're still developing that program so that respite's not just overnight out of the home. We have learning and development expectations and also encouragement and offers. So we've got a My Learning portal for carers to join. There's all sorts of online modules that carers can go through and complete. There are some that are expected, like compulsory modules that need to be completed as a foster carer. Like the understanding child sex abuse and things like that. But also there's self-driven learning as well. And we do put on face-to-face trainings. Our therapeutic framework is called Therapeutic Crisis Intervention. So we do a training program in therapeutic crisis intervention for foster carers and all of our staff as well. And we will be rolling out our children and the residential care experience framework as well, which is another a framework that works very, very closely with therapeutic crisis intervention. So yes, that's all. And then, yeah, trying to build communities of care as well in regions. So now I'll quickly go through the process. We're nearly there, guys. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We're on the final steps now to all your questions. So there are three sections for the inquiry for the assessment process. So the first bit is the inquiry stage, which you are currently undertaking. So you can tick part of this off your list. You have attended an information night. If you go further, and again, I'll get Sharon to put the link into the chat box there. If you want to go further, you fill in that link, and within about 48 hours, you should get a phone call from our national team to talk through any further questions and get the ball rolling with regard to that. Once the national complete that interview, they send that all of those details through to us here in South Australia. And you will get a phone call from someone here in South Australia to arrange a home visit to do an exchange of information and to be able to come out and talk a little bit further, answer more questions, give you the all of the paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork to fill in, and also link you into the orientation training. So there's a 2-day course. We also now have that as 4 part days online as well, which is called Shared Lives, which is the basic training to start with to begin your understanding of what foster care looks like. And then there's the screening stage, which is once you've had that home visit and all the forms are filled in and you, oh no, sorry, this is where we start to do all the, after the shared life. Sorry, if you're still interested, we then go through all of the sort of time intensive stuff of filling in application forms, police checks, child protection checks. So there's a police system and a child protection system, and quite often the two don't match. So we have to look on police systems and we have to look on our child protection systems for anything that needs to be discussed. We also ask for health checks from a GP and a self-health check, and do a household safety check. And then there's the interview stage. So once we've gone through and all the checks have come through and everything's all good to go, and you're still really keen to go and you're feeling well supported, you're doing some of the training that, because there's other preliminary trainings that can be undertaken at that time, you get allocated to an assessment worker. So the person that looks after you from your inquiry stage through to this stage is our carer engagement officer. And Cherie will guide you through all of those processes and help you with all your forms and be your main contact person right up until the point we're ready to go to full assessment. And in full assessment, you get allocated to an assessor who will come and do your assessment interviews, which is a series of interviews. So it's not a very not a one visit. There's several visits to get all of the components of the assessment process filled in. It's quite detailed information that we require. And some people do find that a little confronting and intrusive, because we ask lots of questions. We want to know the ins and outs of your lives and how you've managed difficult situations and all of those sort of things. So we do ask lots of questions, and essentially most situations we can talk through to get a real sense of what it is, what it means, and how you manage your lives if there are things that are that might come up in the assessment. And then essentially just need to articulate all that. So the assessor goes away and writes up the full assessment. You get to have a read of that to make sure that you're happy with everything that's said in it. And then we submit it for approval. And then we wait on that approval from the carer approval and review. That's actually review unit now, which is a government body, South Australian government body. Oh, there's Cherie. Cherie is your carer engagement officer. She's come on board here tonight to think. So if you do, it is Cherie you will be meeting. And we need to wait on, so once all the assessment's done, it's been read through, and Life Without Barriers is really happy to support you. We then send that to the Department of Child Protection, and they go through it as well, and they need to be happy to support you as well. And then it goes forward for approval. So all of that and all of those words, how long does it take? There's a few sort of things that depend on that, a range of different ways that so we try and get the learning, all of the orientation training and online and face-to-face learning as much as we can. If you can get all of that done really quickly, that moves you into the new stages. So your availability it's really the length of time it takes to get to the end of this process depends on an applicant's availability to be able to really meet all of these requirements. So there's home visits, phone calls, getting key pieces of work completed and sent back to the assessors. But we do try and from interview, we do one interview per week over a period of about 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes carers go, no, let's go for it. Let's do 2 a week and get it done. It really does depend on your availability. But once we commence the screening stage, which is where you're filling in all your application forms and all of those sort of things, we do aim to submit an assessment for approval within 3 months. So all up, the process can probably take about 5. We try and get everything right from the moment you contact the inquiry line and have that first phone call. We hope it's a 5-month period to approval, and then we look at matching. Sometimes that matching happens as we're getting closer to the approval stage. But so from tonight, if you do fill in one of those call me back forms, I will. We aim at 5 months. So then, once we've submitted it, though, the time to get approval from the department can vary. We've got no control over that whatsoever. Lately, it's starting to get a little bit better. There was a bit of a backlog for some reason or other, so we were finding that was taking a lot longer than we anticipated, but it does seem to be freeing up a bit more now. So the question now, is it the right time for you? Do you have time to commit to the training that's required? And we do try to be as flexible as we can. Also, do you have time to have someone visit you to fill in all the paperwork, and then also to do all of the assessment interviews? And are other members of your family in a good place for that to happen? So those husbands that you've been speaking to try and get them to come around, are they ready for that? It'll be really critical that everyone's on board, and your children as well, that they know what it means. And have you processed any of the challenges that you've had in your own personal situation? So we do find, obviously, life happens, and some people can have some really quite traumatic experiences as they're growing up, and they've learned great things from it and they moved on from it and those sort of things. So we certainly don't want you to hide those challenging, but what we want to hear is how you've moved through it and grown from it, and being able to articulate and demonstrate that provides us with more evidence to say that you are an ideal for foster care. So our new campaign that's coming along is Everyday Moments Are Everything, and you will start seeing that quite regularly on your screens, television, I think, as well, if I'm correct. And then you will hopefully be triggered to have a look at a little bit further at what foster care is. So that's pretty much all we're at. If you're not in a position to foster right now, you can still help children by supporting us to find foster carers in the community. So please share what you've experienced here tonight and the links around it. And then there's that lovely link again for the form, the Call Me Back form. And I'm just going to now go through, probably throw to Kristy a bit in terms of giving my throat a bit of a thing for some of the frequently asked questions. Once we've gone through the frequently asked questions, there's also a link now in your chat box for stories from our foster carers. So please do go through and have a look at those stories. They are really interesting and quite inspiring. So I'll go through, we'll answer these frequently asked questions, or I'll get Kristy to for the most part, and then you're free to answer more. So the first question is, can I take a foster child on holidays? Kristy?
Yeah, so absolutely. That's definitely a lovely way to make them feel that they belong in your family and create memories together. If it's interstate, then you need to talk to the child's caseworker, because that can affect the child's, my mind's gone blank, I can't think of the word, when they see their biological family, access. Yeah, it's definitely something that you need to let the caseworker know about, where you're going to be going, how long you're going to be going for. And if it's an overseas holiday, then you need to plan ahead, because DCP will need to get permission, provide permission, organise a passport, all of that. So it's definitely a possibility and a beautiful thing to aim for, but just needs to be communicated really well with the caseworker.
Thank you. Next question. Do I get to choose which school they go to? I'm going to let you answer this too, Kristy. Yeah. And then I'll correct you if I need to.
It's different in every case. Carers definitely get input into the decision. DCP makes the final decision, of course. But yeah, if a carer has a legitimate reason why they want a particular school, whether it's because their own children attend there, or they know that it is a very therapeutic, trauma-informed school, and therefore would be good for the child in their care, then DCP will listen to that, investigate it, look into the costs. So yeah, it's definitely something that can be discussed.
Yeah, I would just add on that particular point, that's absolutely correct. But in reunification cases, or cases where it's still a short-term placement and we're not sure whether or not the placement is going to extend, what we try to do is keep everything the same for the child as much as possible. So if they've got a school that they've been going to for a number of years, and they've got links and friends and whatnot in that school environment, unless it's going to be considered a longer placement than just a few weeks, or the emergency and short-term stuff, there's expectation that the child would probably maintain the same school. And we do try and find foster carers in the same or similar areas, so that's not too taxing on transport. The department does sometimes help with transport as well. But of course, in terms of helping a child to feel like they belong and that they're they're worthy and you know, supported, the foster carer being able to take a child and pick a child up from school is really important. But then, yeah, long-term placements, of course, we want to make it so it's close to home, close to where they're, you know, everything's going to now be built for them in their new placement. Kristy, you can answer this one too. Do I get a choice in what child comes to live with us?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think my little comment that I put in the chat before actually showed to everyone that's on tonight. But I did say that when our young person came to us, we absolutely had a choice. Just because we were her respite carers didn't mean we had to keep her once she needed a long-term placement. Most of the people I know that do respite only ever do respite, and that never changes. We have been offered numerous children over the years that we've just thought, no, we don't have the capacity to provide the care they'd need. The timing's not right for us. Their age and behaviours we thought would not work with the children that we have in our home currently. And it's always been, we've always felt very supported in our no's just as much as our yeses. So yeah, you definitely get a choice.
Thank you, Kristy. Are they allowed to call me mum and dad?
This is really up to the child. Sometimes you'll have biological family that are very against it, and that's something that you need to kind of work with the child, the caseworker, the support worker to work out what is appropriate, because you really want to be respectful of the biological family as much as possible. But at the end of the day, it's the child's needs that come first. So if they really want to call you mum and dad and you're comfortable with that, then that's usually what happens. And sometimes, no matter how much you try to stop it, the kids are going to do it anyway. So depending on the kids and the age of the kids, but it's important not to expect the children to do that until they are comfortable with it. Yeah, I think will probably always be Greg and Kristy to the young one in our household, because she was 12 when she came to us. So she loves us, she sees us as family, but yeah, I think we're at this stage, we're definitely not mum and dad in her eyes, and that's okay. Whereas my sister has had an 18-month-old and he wasn't speaking when he came to them at 18 months, and within a week he'd started saying mum and dad, calling my sister and her husband mum and dad, which they didn't encourage at all. They called themselves their names to him, but he just learnt the terms and applied them. So yeah, it's different in every case.
Thank you. Absolutely. We've got, we do have a high percentage of carers that are over sort of over 60, over 65, and they often encourage young people, especially when they first come in, to call them nan or pop or auntie, those sort of things as well. So, but it really is, as Kristy said, something to allow the child to feel comfortable and be comfortable with the way the child would like to refer to you with, providing it's not a rude name of some description. So the last one being, are there any restrictions on pets?
There's not as a black and white rule, but that is something that will be discussed and explored very carefully. Obviously, if you have a big aggressive dog, then that will be a concern, and you'd have to show that you are able to keep the dog separate from children. Obviously, cats are not allowed in a bed with a newborn baby, you know, like, so those things will be discussed, but pets bring a really therapeutic element to a children's life. So it's definitely not a black and white no.
No, that's right. Probably the other thing to think about with that sort of thing as well is that the house, like on home visits and things, if you've got 8 cats, the house is not going to smell like, you know, cat litter and all of that sort of thing, that everything's clean and hygienic around the animals as well is the other thing that, you know, just to add that little bit in. So really that's all the frequently asked questions that come about. If we've triggered any other questions, if you'd like to put them in the chat box, we will do our best to answer them. Hang on, I'll go backwards one. Just a moment, we'll get some questions. Oh, and there's the link again for the stories and the call me back form. Do many sibling sets come through? Kaz, absolutely. Yes, we get primarily a lot of 2 or 3 and sometimes 4 sibling requests. Quite often what we try to do in those situations is find carers that are in close proximity to each other. If a carer can only look after 1 or 2 young people, and we aim, the ideal is to aim to put children together or children with carers that can join up and be supportive to each other and support that connection. Kelly, we have 5 children and 5 bedrooms. Would that still be okay? What needs to, it really does depend, Kelly and Will, is the premise that we ask carers to consider is that each child needs to have their own room. There are some exceptions to that rule. If you've got twins that are quite happy to, you know, and have always stayed in the same room, or you've got kids that share a room, the fundamental rule is that a foster child has to have their own bedroom and their own space to store their belongings. And what we don't want to see doing is disadvantaging biological children by making room for a foster child as well. So it sometimes can be in the national team, they can be quite strict around if you can't demonstrate that you have a room for each of your children, you might get screened out. So you sometimes have to go, you know, we've got options here, please can we still consider, because I'd rather you come through to us for further consideration than just be shut down for that.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
We 2 of our biological boys have always shared a bedroom, so when our home was assessed, that's why we had a spare bedroom, because 2 of our boys share and they just always have, and that's something we have chosen as parents because we think it's important for them to learn to negotiate and share space and whatever. So yeah, we technically don't have enough rooms for every child to have their own bedroom, but we did have a spare room for our foster child because our boys are sharing. So I hope that, yeah, it's worth going further still. Yeah,
definitely. So the next question, what age group is the hardest to find homes for? I have to say we probably struggle the most with adolescents, usually from around the age of 11 or 12 to 16, 17 even. We do foster carers, and those children are just faced with so many challenges. You know, they're developing and trying to understand their trauma and where they fit in the world. They're going through massive hormonal swings and changes as well. They're finding it really hard socially because they don't fit anywhere if they're not like other children, and foster carers can find that really challenging. So we are looking at trying to find better ways to support that adolescent group. How old would my youngest child need to be before I can foster? The rule of thumb in that one is that the child needs to be your own biological children need to be older than the child that you are going to provide care for. It gets a little bit different once we get up into the teenagers and the 10, 11 years old, but they do try and apply the rule that if you've got a 4-year-old child, we wouldn't put a 10-year-old foster child. We wouldn't, unless it was assessed that it was entirely appropriate. We want to sort of keep the foster child younger than your biological child. Kristy, do you have a different experience of that?
That's definitely what we were encouraged and advised, and we believe that was best as well. And in our experience, having any that were within a couple of years of our youngest made it very challenging for him. Whereas our current child is smack bang in the middle of our biological children. So that completely throws that rule out the window, but it has worked. So like there's rules and there's very good reasons for the rules, but when a placement comes up, the experienced Life Without Barriers workers are very good at assessing whether the rule can be bent for this particular child.
Yeah, that's really good, because what you find always in human services is that the human condition is different right across the world, and you can't predict anything in terms of these things. So you do find that you need to be, and we are, flexible and negotiate things, and sometimes things that wouldn't normally work we would assess as being something that actually is quite workable. 71-year-old is, yes, that's okay to foster a child. Generally, we look at the age group, the kind of care that a 71-year-old might provide. So it might be respite or short term. We wouldn't probably look at putting a newborn baby with a 71-year-old as a long-term placement, because that's an 18-year, an 18-year commitment, and probably a little bit difficult. But yes, we do sort of look at those sort of things. 71, we would definitely continue to assess, especially if there are specialist skills there, that we could do specialist respite or something like that, an emergency and short-term work. My partner and I both work full-time, but can be flexible and can work at home some of the time if needed. Can we still foster? Absolutely, you can still foster. We wouldn't look so much at specialist right off the bat in that situation, because you probably need to have a little bit more sort of flexibility in that space. But general foster care, there's nothing at all to stop anyone from being able to do that, and fantastic if you can work from home and be flexible. Kristy, what are your working things, your family?
Yeah. I was working almost full time when we were doing respite and some short-term placements, while my husband was working part-time and studying. Now he's working full-time, and I do relief teaching. So some weeks I work almost full-time, other weeks I don't work at all. But yeah, that means I'm flexible to be able to say no, the kids have got stuff on this week. And thankfully I just do relief at one kindy, and they are very supportive of foster care. So they're very understanding if I say, sorry, I know I came in today, but now I have to leave, and they'll cover me and find someone else. So yeah, if you're in the right job that is flexible and you have understanding bosses, then it's definitely workable.
Excellent.
Yeah, they do need you to be more available than biological kids generally.
Yes, thank you. And would we get to connect with other experienced foster carers if we were successful in becoming foster carers? Well, absolutely. What we try to do is connect you really early on. So in some of the orientation things, we try and get our carer ambassadors like Kristy to turn up and provide some support on those nights for you to meet. We have get-togethers and carer groups with our Mockingbird family approach, which is on our website. I think you'll be able to have a look at what that is. that will be another thing about linking carers into experienced, linking people together to share experiences. Kristy, you're just all over the place now these days with your ambassador role, aren't you, in helping out?
Yeah, I love spending time with other foster carers. I actually caught up with a lady today who I became friends with on a Facebook foster care site. I can't remember how we even kind of connected individually on the site, but for the last year or so, we've just been chatting online, and every now and then we'll catch up in person and share stories and encourage each other. And yeah, I've been to coffee mornings that Life Without Barriers has put on with other carers. There's definitely lots of options and availability if that's something you're wanting and looking for. And yeah, there's myself and a couple of other ambassadors that work with Life Without Barriers, intentionally being available to support new carers, answer any questions. Yeah, we've been asked to catch up individually with some people that are looking into caring, to answer questions, let you see how our life functions while we do it. So yeah, it's definitely possible.
Excellent. My husband and I have done the Shared Lives course 3 years ago. Would we need to redo that? Well, again, it's flexible. I'm not sure what the change, if there's been any changes in 3 years. I think if the course has changed a bit since 3 years ago, it would be good for you to sort of get a refresher on it, I suppose, to some degree. But you might be able to do that on the online one, which is run over 4 evenings that are spread out, rather than having to do the 2 full-day courses. Certainly, again, something to negotiate around that kind of thing. And do babies need their own room, or can they sleep in a cot in the carer's room, in particular short-term and emergency placement? This one, you're absolutely right. They can, for children under 2, so any child under 2, you can have a placement in your a cot in the carer's room. It can't be shared with another biological child, and that can be a short term. But as soon as they turn 2 years of age, they can still sleep in the cot in your room, but they have to have access to their own space and own bedroom from the age of 2. Oh yes, and just a reminder that short term, when we say short term, that can be up to 2 years. So short term sometimes is quite long. Lots of great questions, I have to say. I've gone through the interviews, checks, training, etc. through another agency. Are you able to get those reports from them? Absolutely, Rudy. What we just need to do in that situation is get a consent to share information, and we then send that through to the agency to say this person has approached us. So again, if you go on the Call Me Back form, they can go through that process with you, and forward that through for that to be shared. So it may be that you're almost there at the end, at the finishing line. So really that brings us to the end of our session. And if there's no other questions, please feel free to ask. There's the Call Me Back link again in the chat box for you. I do thank you very much, and again would love to just encourage you to share this information. You will receive a copy, a link in an email to this recorded session with all the questions answered at the end as well. So you'll be able to fast forward or go back to things if you want to, but also you can share that link with your networks if they want to sit down. Having said that, the last Wednesday of every month, we do a webinar. So keep an eye out for the links. I won't be doing one in July because I'm going to Mount Gambier to do one in Mount Gambier. But in August, last Wednesday in August, there will be another webinar put on for you to be able to have a look again, or to encourage your friends to join. So that's pretty much us. That's Life Without Barriers. That's what we do. And we would really, I tried to make a callback form, but won't accept because no. Oh, our MAC officer, can you provide some advice to that question? That's a technical question that I've got no idea.
Hi Lydia, how you going? I can email you a copy of the link if that helps, or I can pass your details directly on to our carer inquiry team if you want to pass on your mobile number to us so that they can contact you. But I can email it to you if you prefer.
You're welcome, Deb. Thank you. And thanks for your help again for the first. Deb was here 15 minutes early, like me. You're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to have a look and listen.